What's up guys, Wade Willis here for my playthrough of Umineko. This is chapter 4, part 12. The last episode I kind of went through was absolutely heartbreaking and disturbing. We saw Maria absolutely lose it, which is completely justified knowing all the shitty things that Rosa's done and just the excuses that Rosa constantly makes it's appalling. For her behavior. And yeah, honestly, that was one of the most powerful episodes that I've put out, I think. It was very good, and yeah, I don't have that much to say about it. So if you didn't see that episode, make sure you check that one out. And yeah, let's get into the new one. Damn right it was.
近いんじゃねえか
みたいだね。いくつになっても落雷にはビクッとさせられるね。
Battler was looking at the dark night through the crack in the curtains. Every once in a while a pale, white lightning bolt would shine and he seemed to be enjoying it.
Oh? なんだよ。バトラが騒がしくしてるからマリアが起きちゃったじゃねえか。ごめんなマリア。バトラが騒がしくて。
なんだよ、俺のせいかよ。悪いな、マリア。寝てていいぞ。おやすみな。
Maria was a bit hazy with drowsy eyes. She was probably half asleep and couldn't think straight.
おー、もういい。寝ない。
いいから寝てろって。まだ寝ぼけてるぜ。
寝ぼけてない。
なんだよ、もろに寝ぼけてるじゃねえか。寝てろ寝てろおい。
It's such a strange thing to lose your temper on, but
もう寝起きのこの機嫌を悪くするなんてバカだな。
you won't like her when she's angry.
寝ぼけてない。寝ぼけてないもん。
Alright, we got it, Maria.
わかってるよ、マリアちゃん。寝ぼけてなんかないよ。だから落ち着いて。
We all got it.
寝ぼけてないもん。寝ぼけてない。
Damn, girl! Yeah, we fucking know. Maybe it's because of her delicate mental state after waking up, but Maria suddenly threw a tantrum. Battler had only been trying to tease her a bit, so he was confused by the extreme overreaction. Yeah, that is... George held her head, trying to calm her down, but Maria's tantrum wasn't going to be quelled easily. Battler and Jessica were trying to push the blame on each other, saying it's your fault. It's your fault, too.
こら、二人とも静かにして。
Yeah, both of you two are jabroni.
ジェシカちゃん、ポットにまだお湯があったよね。お茶でも入れてあげてくれる？落ち着いた？マリアちゃん。
It looked like her tantrum was dying down bit by bit, but she still glared at Battler, who made fun of her with sharp eyes.
バトラ君もふざけて言っただけなんだよ。マリアちゃんが寝ぼけてるなんて思ってないよ。だから落ち着いて。ね。
George noticed Maria was staring at Battler with incredible eyes. And despite having just displayed all that emotion, she laughed in a small voice. Battler's first to die. Instead of a laugh, it seemed more like she was muttering what thinking about, or else counting each high. As though each time she said he, something brutal would happen over and over. George felt something creepy just for an instant, but he couldn't spot the madness that peeked out of the depths of the girl's eyes for just a moment. After a short period of stunned silence on George's part, Maria stopped her bizarre quiet laugh and pushed George's arm aside, as though telling him to let go.
許す。
そう マリアちゃんは偉いな。バトラ君、マリアちゃんが許してくれたよ。仲直りして。
ああ、悪いな、からかって。許してくれ。
ほら、マリア、仲直りの印にカフェオレ作ってやったぜ。砂糖いっぱい入ってるから甘いぜ。
いらない。でも許すよ。魔女だからね。
Oh. One more time, Maria laughed in a creepy, quiet voice. But it was only for a short time, so Battler and Jessica didn't think much of it. They decided to think that. It probably only looked that way when the lighting lit her cheek with a pale white light for an instant. I don't think so. At that time, they could hear the sound of loud footsteps coming from the hall. It was already about 10:30, late at night. Late at night it is usually the time when you aren't supposed to be disturbed. Hearing footsteps like that at this time was far from calming. Then, along with a clearly ominous knock that repeated fiercely, they could hear Goda and Kumasawa's voices. That clearly told them that this was an abnormal situation.
お子様方、いらっしゃいますか？いらっしゃいますか？ゴーダでございます。
熊沢でございますよ。ご無事でございますか？どうしたものやら、どうしたものやら。
So we really haven't seen Beatrice at all in this world yet, right? When George opened the door, the two of them tumbled in, sopping wet. It looked like they had dashed here from the mansion without an umbrella.
どうしたんだよ、二人とも。
You fit to find out what
何
happened.
があったんだ？
Yep,
それが
this dooflagoo.
親方様が、旦那様が、皆様方が。
Yo, tell him what happened. Jesus. What? What the hell just happened? Did my game break? That was such a weird stop. Huh. It was very abrupt. It was a pitch black room. There were no windows, and with a weak light bulb, one could just make out the state of things around them. It appeared to be an old, forgotten underground storage room with some kind of dusty furniture haphazardly thrown into it. What the However, even if just a little light, one could at least make out that it probably wasn't a storage room. After all, that room was sealed off with iron bars.
ここはどこなの？
Ah.
わからん。ここは屋敷の地下なのか。
If this is underneath, I freaking called that there was shit under the mansion the whole
食堂
goddamn
の真下
time.
にこんな部屋があったのか。
But it could be that lady's magical powers that put you in a, pit. They had dropped into what appeared to be a pit falling into this room. Sorry. Therefore, it was natural to assume that this room was directly under the dining hall. However, not even Krauss could bring himself to believe that there were pitfalls rigged in his beloved dining hall, where he had enjoyed his meal for years. And that this dungeon-like room lay directly beneath it. This is like some Resident Evil shit right here. But the ceiling above was of crude stone craftsmanship, and they couldn't understand how they could have fallen from somewhere up there. No, all 5 people have been dropped here as though here thought the same thing. Although they had the sensation of falling into a pit, there was no way there could be pitfalls in the dining hall, nor this dungeon-like place could be directly under it. But the truth is that they had actually fallen into this place and were locked in it. So they were confused. Yeah, I would be confused as well.
あの高さから落ちて誰も怪我をしなかったのは
Especially
かもしれませんな。
your fat ass.
カノン、君たちはこんな部屋の存在は知っていたかね？
いいえ、僕たちもこのような部屋のことは存じかねます。本当に？
本当です。本当にこの部屋知りません。
So there has to be an explanation for this. Now, we can see that this is Maybe just the magical explanation from the witches, or there must be some other way they could be hidden away somewhere, some hidden passages or something. Despite their age, Kyrie apparently wouldn't have found it odd if they, as servants, allowed to wear the one-winged eagle, might know of the mansion's secret tricks. There was a long silence, as if Kraus was evaluating their answer.
いや、シャノンたちが知らないのは
Yeah,
事
this
実
has to be somewhere, though, like...
何しろ、綺麗好きのシャノン
Because there has to be a non-magic answer.
彼女がこの部屋を知っていたなら、もっとピカピカに磨き上げているだろう。この部屋の汚さが、君たちがこの部屋を知らないことの証だ。
It's a great point, Kraus.
今はそんなことより、
One of the few good points you've
こ
ever
れから
made.
どうするかの方が先決だと思わんかね。その通りです。警察に、いえ、それから救急にも早く電話
Good
をしな
luck
け
with
れ
the
ば。
police, homie. None just words were hollow. Obviously, 6 people have been killed in the dining hall. Everybody had seen the exact moment when they had been killed. And since half of their heads had been destroyed, anyone could tell that the deaths had been instant with just a single glance. Everyone understood that at first first aid no longer held any meaning.
ありがとう、南條先生。私たちは伴侶がもう生きてはいないことを理解できてる。気休めでも救急と言い添えてくれてありがとう。
Yeah, I don't know. Or you could just be a shitty doctor.
夏井。
Do we know if he's even a good doctor? Once again, a gloomy silence dominated the atmosphere, but Kress shook his head harshly over and over for the time being. Decided to forget the pain of losing his wife and dedicate himself to figuring out where they were.
みんな聞きたまえ。親父はもうダメだ。口で言って理解や説明が求められる段階にもうない。
Nobody answered. Without any kind of discussion or mercy, 6 people had been killed in an instant. And Kinzo had been even as so bold as to proclaim that we become sacrifices for a ceremony involving 13 murders. Since we've been locked up in this place, we too will probably become the ceremony's next sacrifices soon. Around this time, our eyes became used to the darkness, and bit by bit we were able to understand more about the dungeon's interior. What we thought was furniture haphazardly left in the dungeon turned out not to be furniture at all. They were things like small cages to lock people in, restraints, or else torture racks. At any rate, it was obvious that this was even eerier than just a mere jail cell. Since the objects were rusted together and coated with thick dust, there was no doubt that they had been forgotten. Maybe you could even call these things Kinzo's sealed and forgotten madness. However, we have been locked away in this room. Those objects weren't exactly comforting to the people who were locked up, hoping to be released without harm.
とにかくここを抜け出そう。私たちは伴侶や友人を失い、涙を流すことに時間を費やしたいが、今はそれ以上に子供たちの身が心配だ。
Yeah, I would say that would be the number one thing, not the freaking shedding tears. You have no time to cry.
ご無事でしょうか。
祈るしかない。そういえば、熊沢さんと郷田さんはここにはいないな。
ひょっとすると無事に逃げ延びられたのかも。
Yeah, of all the people not to be able to catch, those two I would not have
子供
expected.
たちと合流しててくれれば心強いのですが。
郷田さんはいざという時頼りになるし、熊沢さんは経験豊富で落ち着いてるし、きっと力になってくれると思います。
I think it was like episode 2, Goda actually like was going ham.
そうだといいがな。
Shin and Crest smiled bitterly a little, but they quickly realized how improper that was and stopped, clearing their throats.
楽観はできないよ、姉さん。僕らに続いて、もう襲われてしまってる可能性だってある。
Well, I expected Debbie Downer to bring
同
down the
感
mood.
ね。 お父様が食堂で執行したのは、
Now, it's
魔女の碑
super...
文の第一の番の6人殺しなんでしょ？
It's super clutch that Kyrie is one of the people still alive because she's
なら、
actually
第2
smart
の
as
番
shit.
は、寄り添いし2人を引き裂け。逃げ隠れて寄り添っている郷田さんと熊沢さんが、もう殺されている可能性だって否定できないわ。
I doubt it would be them
きっと
because
ゲ
they
ストハウ
aren't
スに合流してて、
close.
子供たちを守ってくれているなんて楽観。現時点では全くできないわよ。
Kyrie coldly analyzed the worst case scenario. For her, it was heartbreaking to have lost her beloved husband. But right now, the most important thing was protecting that husband's son, along with the other children from becoming the insane family head sacrifices. She overcame her sadness with a parental urge to protect children from sorrow. It seemed that both Kyrie and Kraus were strong enough to forget about the grief, if only for the time being. They would let their tears flow later. In order to protect the children, they had to act.
とにかくここを脱出しよう。
Alright, Cannon, use your magic.
相当古い牢屋のようだ。なんとか鉄格子を破れないだろうか。
Great idea.
室内をくまなく探して脱出手段を探してみよう。
There's likely a torture device in there that can
こ
help.
こにはガラクタがいろいろあるわ。
There we
何か
go.
役に立ちそうな道具とか落ちてないかしら。
Kyrie for the win.
武器になるものがあるかもしれないし、鉄格子を破れるものがあるかもしれない。
Kyrie pulled a lighter from her pocket. She herself didn't smoke, but she kept one tucked away in her pocket to light Rudolph's cigarettes. It was an extremely valuable source of light for searching in this dim dungeon.
シャノンはキリエさんを手伝い、室内を探索してく
They
れ。
could just use their cell phone lights, right?
カノンは私と一緒に鉄格子の具合を確かめてみよう。これだけ古い牢屋だ。ひょっとするとガタが来ているかもしれない。
私は何をお手伝いしましょうかな。
Dude, you just chill there.
体力を温存していてください。やがてここに親父殿が現れるだろう。親父殿に言葉が届くのは南條先生だけです。
I doubt
あ
it.
る意味、南條先生に我々の命は握られているかもしれない。
私の言葉などもう届きはせんでしょう。申し訳ないが、そのお役には立てそうにない。
なら、南條先生のお医者としての知識を貸してください。
Oh my god, what can he
人間
do?
を即座に混沌させるような毒って存在するのかしら？
Yeah, chloroform.
人間を即座に混沌させる毒？どういうことですか？
私たちは落とし穴に落とされて、この地下牢に落ちてきたと信じている。あの混乱している場で、私たちはそうだったろうと信じたわ。
Dude, she's so smart.
でも、この地下牢の広さを測ってみて分かった。この地下牢が、あの食堂の地下というのはありえないことなのよ。
どうしてありえないってわかるんですか？
姉さんはバカだな。この地下牢は、食堂に比べて狭すぎる。
その通り。
Well,
1番目に落とされたのはクラウス兄さん。2番目が私。クラウス兄さんはこの部屋に落ちてきた時、その場を動いたかしら。
お恥ずかしながら落下の痛みでうめいていたよ。そのすぐ傍らにキリエさんがすぐに落ちてきたんだ。
食堂でのクラウス兄さんと私の立ち位置と、落下時の落下場所の距離が明らかにおかしいのよ。
確かに言われてみれば
now that's a
そ
good
の
point.
通りです。その次に落ちたのは私だから、お二人の位置関係はよく覚えている。食堂でのお二人の間の距離はこの部屋よりもあったかもしれない。
I should have thought of the
私たちは
drugging him
落と
thing.
し穴に落ちてダイレクトにここに落下したわ。集合する下水道管みたいに一度集められてからここに落ちた
I
わけ
mean,
じゃない。
that is kind of the thing. I was thinking of a pipe thing actually is what I was.
落下は一瞬だったでしょ？
I was thinking of like a slide
そん
thing.
な凝った排水管みたいな穴を転がされた覚えはないわ。
確かに。落としがおかしな話だ。
それと、キリエ様のおっしゃる人間を即座に混沌させる毒というのはどう関係があるんですか？
Ketamine or chloroform? Some type of...
キリエ様は多分、食道に落とし穴なんかなかったとお考えなんじゃないか。
しかし、現に私たちは落ち
You
た
know,
ぜ。
you couldn't fall from like 5 feet if someone was carrying you.
落とし穴に落ちたような気がするが正解よ。無理もないわ。
Well, and yeah, if you take certain drugs, it makes like you're like sinking into the ground.
そうとしか例えられない体験だったから。
なるほど。
Let's see what this guy's pharmaceutical
つま
knowledge
り
is.
こうおっしゃいたいわけですな。私たちは落とし穴に落とされ、例えば毒矢のようなもので撃たれ、
I mean,
瞬
yeah,
時
I
に意
guess.
識を
I'm
失い、
sure blow
そ
dart's
の
not
倒れ
bad.
て床に突っ伏す瞬間の記憶をまるで落とし穴に落ちたようと
Tranquilizer?
思い込んでしまっているのかもしれないと。
なるほど。食道に無数の落とし穴が仕掛けられていて、我々がそれに何十年も気づかず食事をしていたとするよりは。
姉さん、時計はある？
うん。懐中時計があるわよ。22時40分くらいね。
僕の時計もそうなってる。つまり僕たちは、食堂での大騒ぎから、十数分。
私の時計も同様だ。我々が混沌させられて、どこかへ担ぎ込まれたと仮定するには、時間だけを見るなら、やはり我々は食堂の真下へ。
Or they changed their watches.
時計の針なんていくらでもいじれるわ。
Yeah, that's not.
私たちが気絶している間に全員の時計を巻き戻したのか
I
もしれ
agree
ない
that especially it's not they're not
その可
digital.
能性がなかったことは証明不能よ。
落とし穴にせよ、混沌させる毒にせよ、私たちは用心するに越したことはないというわけですな。
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
それで南條先生、混沌させる毒は存在するんですか？
Yeah, there's quite a few.
それはキリエさんの論法と同じですな。私の知らない未知の毒物にそういう効用のものがないとは
Oh my God.
証明できません。
用心に越したことはないということね。ごめんなさい。無駄な質問だったわ。
It would need to be either like a tranquilizer or some type of inhalant, probably, because it couldn't be a pill because it would take too long for your body to process it and feel like that way.
ただ、私の仮説により、この地下牢が食堂の真下とは限らないという可能性は示唆できたと思う。
なるほど。広大な森の中のどこかに親父殿の隠し屋敷の地下牢に運び込まれている可能性もある。
I don't even know if it's
外へ出れ
necessarily.
ばそれもわかる。
I mean, they could be in that mansion, but I would say there's a very strong possibility that they are under the regular mansion, and there's just these hidden things that they didn't know about, and they were carried, but they didn't have to go through the
それを
forest.
詮索するのはここから出てからでもいいだろうな。
その通りね。本当にごめんなさい。さっきから無駄な質問と詮索ばかりだわ。
No, that's actually pretty important.
いや、とても頼もしいよ。今後も何かに気づいたら教えてくれたまえ。ここを脱出する何かのヒントになるかもしれない。ルドルフからいつも聞かされていたよ。君の発想にはいつも驚かされ、時には重要なヒントにもなると
Yeah,
ね。
because Rudolph was
君がここにいてくれたのは
Doof Magoo.
不幸中の
She's a
幸いだ。
genius.
ありがとう。
I said she'd be important, didn't I,
私
guys?
もルドルフさんに聞いてるわ。クラウス兄さんは普段は威張っているけれど、いざという時は責任感にあふれる頼りがいのある兄だって。
さすがにそれは世辞が過ぎるね。くそ。 それにカノンの方はどうかね。
いえ、こちらも全く。
Have you looked for the tools? Kraus and Kanan were wiggling the bars in various ways. There were a few bars that could be twisted, and a few had enough space to rattle a bit around it, but they couldn't be broken with human strength alone. However, there was still hope that they could use some kind of lever-like tool. It was still far too early to give up yet. The children's lives were hanging in the balance. Even if there was no hope, they couldn't stop their struggle, and it was better for them to act this way. If they were to stop, there's no doubt they'd once again be overcome by the grief of losing their loved ones, curl up, clutching their knees. Shit.
キリエさんたちの方はどうかね。何か見つかったかね。
握って隠せる程度の石ころは見つかるわ。こんなものでも武器にはなるかも。さすがに鉄格子を削り取ることは無理でしょうね。シャノンちゃんはどう？
いいえ、何も。これ、電話です。
繋がってるわけもないわ。でも、コードは何かを縛ったり、武器にも使えるかも。壊して分解すれば、金属部品を取り出せるわ。クラス兄さん、鉄格子を開ける鍵穴は、もちろんあるわよね。
ああ、だいぶ鍵穴の大きい大時代的なものだがね。針金のようなものでいじれば騙せるかもしれないな。
電話の金属部品で何か代用できるかもしれない。その電話、武器になるわね。
Maybe you try to use the phone first, though? Just, I mean, it's probably not going to work, but...
情報は武器だ。
Chris and Kyria laughed together at how they hadn't thought of using the phone as a means of communication.
何やってんの、姉さん。
その、電話、繋がってるかなって。
バカだな。ね。
あれ？
At that point, Shannon let out a small surprised cry.
キリエ様？この電話、繋がってます。
Boom!
なんですって？
It was like when people move out of an office, taking everything with them, leaving only a telephone behind. That's the feeling this phone gave off, having been left in the corner of a cell. The cord was round into a coil and the tip of it was being swallowed by the wall. And just by looking at it, there was no reason to assume that it wasn't hooked up. But to think that it actually was. Kyria took the receiver from Shannon and pressed it to her ear. Certainly the electric hum of the phone was a familiar sound. And this phone was certainly live.
なんという幸運。警察へ連絡しましょう。
待ちたまえ。話がうますぎる。盗聴されているんじゃないのかね。
Who cares?
そんな細工するくらいなら、普通は電話線を切断するわ。電柱が本気で見落とした可能性が高い。
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter if they're bugged. They already know you're in the prison thing.
気づかれたら、今度こそ電話線を切断されるかもしれないわ。警察への通報を盗聴されて、何も困ることはないのだし。
Right. Surely that was true. The point of the wiretap is to overhear some important piece of information. But the way things were right then, she couldn't think of a single thing that would come up in conversation to the outside world that might be troublesome to have overheard. Kyria instantly concluded there was more likely to be a mistake on Kinza's part than a trap.
確かに一理あります。
Yeah, I mean, I gotta agree with this.
外線は確か0番からだ。
カノン君、私は電話するから、あなたは外の様子を伺ってくれる？誰かが近づいてくる気配があったら知らせて。
はい。
Kanan raced off towards the iron bars, silenced his breathing, and strained his ears as everyone present watched her. Kyria dialed 110. However, she pushed the hook down and redialed many times. It didn't seem to be working very well.
外線は0番から？ 110番は0110じゃないの？うまくかからない。
Did you ask nicely?
貸したまえ。私がかけよう。
Chris took the receiver in Kyrie's place and tested various things. But in the end, they were unable to notify the police. The phone itself was definitely live, but the circuit was apparently cut somewhere. Did that mean that they were not so naive?
やっぱり無理ですか。
敵も甘くはないってことね。
Kyrie let out a deep sigh and leaned against the wall and hung her head for a while. As cool thinking as she was, for a brief moment she actually had the naive hope that the phone might actually work. She stared at herself mockingly for holding on to that naive hope for even a single moment. Then she remembered just what was happening here. Truth be told, even after being shown a scene like that right before her eyes, or rather exactly because of that, she still couldn't think of a gruesome mass murder as something real. It was less that she couldn't believe it and more that she didn't want to. Kinzo killed 6 family members. He summoned strange witch-like demon-like people right out of thin air, and with something like magic, began to kill people one after another. It's just all so screwed up. Even though she definitely saw it, there was no way she could accept that spectacle. They could be drugged, though, with like a hallucinogen.
そんなことあるわけがない。
Kind of like Salem witch trials. I think they, a lot of the people in that town, I think it's ergot. There's some fungus that was in their food, which is why people were like thinking there was all this witchcraft stuff. It's a hallucinogen.
あれはきっとお父様の友人か何か。それがあらかじめ食堂のどこかに隠れていて、手品的に突然姿を現して私たちを驚かせただけなんだわ。そう考えなくちゃあのめちゃくちゃを説明できない。
Which that'd be interesting if they drugged them with something like ergot, and because these are witches, the whole Salem witch. Interesting. I don't think they would do a drugging thing, but I could be wrong. But when those 6 had their heads blown apart with a golden arrow that had flown around the room, that had truly looked like magic. Was that that another thing we just saw wrong? There's no way it was magic. It was definitely some kind of setup. Since those heads were smashed, there was no doubt it was some kind of explosive. For example, a styrene toy plane, like they sell at the candy stores, painted gold, and with a powerful explosive loaded into the end of it. However, they thought, though it had seemed to be flying around at random, Kyrie couldn't imagine that after being fired 6 times, each had been perfectly hit the victims in the head one after another. It couldn't be that there was a computer control system for finding and hitting targets, making it a high-tech styrene plane on the same level as a guided missile, right? Well,
そんなバカバカしい仕掛けを膨大な私費を投じて作らせたと。
yes, he would certainly do something like that.
あのおかしな余興のためにお父様ならやりかねないって
A number of mysterious people appeared out of thin air. 6 people had their heads demolished by a mysterious golden flying object. And the 5 of us were locked away in a mysterious dungeon by a mysterious set of pitfalls, or else put to sleep by some fainting poison dart. The family conference started a bit after 22 hours, and it had only been a bit more than 30 minutes since then, most likely. Even though I witnessed it myself, that event took place in such a short period of time, so I still can't understand it, and I still can't come to grips with it. For argument's sake, even if we did get a hold of the police, it would probably be impossible for anyone to accurately explain what we saw. Even though I saw just now, my brain's fried and I have no confidence in what I saw. Kyrie tried her hardest to cheer herself out of her overwhelming confusion to just hold on to her sanity.
くそ、どうなってるんだろう。くそ、くそ。
Chris started becoming desperate, hitting the hook multiple times and resetting the dial. Chris had also been feigning composure, but he was unable to hide his panic. The more he retreaded the dial, the more pretense of serenity peeled away. I don't know what's going on anymore. Kyrie couldn't help but pray that the events that had just occurred were a dream. At that time, she looked at Cress's... The look on Cress's face changed.
呼び出してる。呼び出してるぞ。コル音がする。
本当ですか、クラウスさん。
He just shook it real hard.
なるほどな。親父め、浅はかな。警察に連絡されまいと外部への電話線は切断したらしいが、内線は切断し損ねている。
あ
あ。内線？クラウスさんはどこにかけているの？
The other house.
ゲストハウスだ。
Boom.
ジェシカたちの部屋の内線番号にかけている。もしもし、もしもし、私だ。お前は誰か？ゴーダか？ジェシカはいるか？無事か？
旦那様、ご無事でよかった。はい。ジェシカお嬢様たちも皆さんご無事です。
父さんなの？無事でよかった。母さんは無事なの
？Nah, she dead. Chris had clearly seen Natsui's head crushed and had seen her killed right before his eyes. Eventually he was going to have to tell that to Jessica. However, Chris began to fret over whether he should tell her now or not, and lost his words. But even that was an answer under the circumstances.
母さんはわからない。無事を祈ろう。
Bro.
今はお前だけでも無事でよかった。
わかってるよ。ごめん。
Jessica's voice was filled with tears. Chris was certain now. Jessica and the rest had heard everything, start to finish after meeting up with Goda and Kumasawa at the guest house. When they had learned that 6 people had been killed, they must have been anxious to rush over to the dining hall. Luckily, he'd been able to call before they'd stormed off towards the mansion. Chris was relieved at this good timing during such a tragedy.
ここには今、キリエさんと南條先生、それにシャノンとカノンがいる。地下牢のようなところに閉じ込められているが、心配するな。こっちは父さんたちで何とかする。
地下牢？どこ？助けに行く。
あいにく、私たちにもここがどこだか見当もつかん。食堂の真下だと思っているが、そうでないかもしれない。とにかくジェシカ、そこを出てはならん。ゴーダたちから経緯は聞いているか？
うん、小さく。みんな、だって。
おじいさまは今、正常な状態にない。出くわせば危険だ。殺されるかもしれない。私たちを助けに来ようなどと絶対に思ってはならんぞ。こっちはこっちで何とかする。
じゃあ私たちはどうすればいいの？小さなね、よくも母さんたちを、あの死に損ないぶっ殺してやる。
ジェシカ、そんな言葉を使ったらレディーはそんな言葉を使う。
I don't think that matters right now, dude.
とにかくお前たちは皆ゲストハウスを戸締まりするんだ。しかし過信はできない。1階のラウンジの大窓は破られるかもしれない。その部屋にとどまりベッドを立てかけてバリケードにするんだ。その部屋にはトイレも冷蔵庫もあるな。明日の朝までは籠城できるはずだ。いいな。くれぐれも物騒なことは考えるな。母さんの仇を取ろうなんて絶対相手を刺激せず、隠れてやり過ごすことだけを考えるんだ。
分かったよ、盗作。
After that, Goda took the phone and was firmly told to supervise the kids as an adult. Goto, with his face covered in a cold sweat, repeatedly replied, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir," in an excessively tense voice. From there, Kirie took the receiver and spoke with Battler, and when Shannon and Cannon got their turns, George and Jessica answered. Following that pattern, Nanjo and Kumasawa picked up as well, so that the members on both sides took the receiver in turn. Confirming that everyone was safe for now, even if their location was unknown, and encouraging each other, coming to an understanding on the current situation for both sides. They wouldn't talk forever, but now was not the time to chat. Chris explained that they would be hanging out for now, and those in the guest house consented.
また何かあったら連絡する。すぐに受話器を取れるように待機していてくれ。くれぐれも用心してな。無茶なことは絶対にするんじゃないぞ。
Yeah, well, that's definitely gonna happen.
父さんやカノン君たちが無事だったって。
Trying to get that cannon dick is what's
私たち
happening.
も頑張る。父さんたちも。
ああ、もちろんだ。それでは一度切る。用心しろ。
With that, the phone call ended. Goto and the rest of the men quickly descended to the first floor, closed the shutters, and secured the sturdy locks on the doors. However, just as Krauss had worried, there was nothing that could be done about the beautiful wide window on the first floor lounge. If someone broke that, it would be easy to get inside. It wouldn't be rather hard for someone like Kinzo, who hadn't hesitated at committing murder, to invade the first floor.
おじいさまたちは武装している可能性が高い。
Yeah, with magic
部屋に
arrows.
閉じこもるのが最善かつ唯一の籠城方法になるね。自ら密室に閉じこもらざるを得ないのは苦しいところだけど、相手が銃を持っていたらそれしか方法がない。
Let's see how long they stay in there. Is a real
親
quick.
方様は実銃のコレクションをお持ちとの話です。そう、あれは銃だ。銃だったんだ。だとしたら恐ろしい威力の銃だ。とても太刀打ちはできません。
頭を砕くなんてすげえ威力だぜ。マグナム弾とかそういう類のやつかも。
Magnum would be a good.
下手な扉なら平気で貫通するかもしれねえな。
だとすればますますに部屋に籠城するべきだね。ベッドを立てかけて窓も塞ごう。そこまですればいくら銃を持っていても踏み込むことはできないはず。
くそ、そんな受け身な防戦一方しかねえのかよ。
Defense wins championships.
くっしょー、うちの親父に上等を決めてくれてキリエさんまで捕まえたなんて、こいつは高くつくぞ。クソじじいめ。
無理です。あんな連中に太刀打ちできるわけがあり
Okay,
ません。
Goto, we need to come up with
しか
plans
も
here,
親
not
方
just.
様だけでなく、手下、あるいはあんな連中がもっといるかも。あいつらは一体何なんだ。
Demons, homie. Battler was filled to the brim with an urge to get revenge for Rudolph, and to rush out there to save Kyrie. But just by looking at how terrified Goto was, there was no doubt in him that this would be reckless.
兄貴だって悔しいだろ。なのにここで籠城なんて。ちくしょう。
もちろんさ、僕だって悔しいよ。両親を殺されて冷静でいられるわけがない。
Yeah, George is. I
でも
keep forgetting
だ
both
か
his
らこそ
parents are dead.
冷静にならなくちゃいけない。僕たちが無駄に命を落とすようなことを殺された親たちが望むと思うかい？思うわけがない。せめて子供だけは逃げ延びてほしいと願ってるはずだ。だから僕は生き残るよ。そして警察に通報し、全てを暴く。仇は法廷が取る。それが僕の復讐だ。差し違えてでも仇を取ってほしいなんて親たちが望んでいるわけもない。そうだろう。
そうだな、兄貴の言う通りだぜ。ちくしょう、クソじじいめ。俺たちがそのための生贄だって言うなら意地でも逃げ切ってその儀式を
それでいいよ。 それに、バトラ君にはまだキリエさんがいる。僕にだって、とにかく慎重に行動して、チャンスを待とう。僕たちの不用意な行動は、囚われの彼らに不利益を与える可能性だってあるんだから。
人質。でも、じい様はきっと、キリエさんたちを生贄にするために捕らえたわけだろう。俺たちが助けなきゃ、殺されるのを待つだけじゃないのか。
彼らが捕らえられている地下牢がどこにあるかもわからない。シャノンもカノン君も、もちろん、ゴーダさんも熊沢さんも知らなかった。おじい様だけしか知らない秘密の場所にある可能性が極めて高い。そんな状況下で、うろうろと歩き回るのは自殺行為だよ。
I mean,
それでも
he's speaking facts here.
俺たちはここで何かが起こるまで引きこもってるしかねえってのかよ。
バトラ様のお気持ちはわかりますが、ここは安全第一で参りましょう。旦那様の話では相当なんとか鉄格子を破れるかもしれないとのことで、今は信じて待つ方が賢明です。
おじい様の手下が何人もいて、みんな武装しているんだよね。
Yeah, that's an understatement.
そうで、そして多分みんな武装を。
Good had been able to say that Kinzo had his comrades with him, but he hadn't been able to mention that they were mostly young women like witches who had used strange magic to murder. If he had said that, it would only have cast doubt on his sanity. No, not only that, he himself couldn't understand what he had seen and was doubting his own sanity. But regardless of sex or appearance, regardless of whether it was done with magic or a gun, the fact that those girls had followed Kinzo's orders and killed 6 people in an instant was the unshakable truth. If that group came to attack the guest house as well, what will happen? Just closing the doors and windows like this would surely be meaningless. Yeah, that's why you gotta do barricades, set up some traps maybe. Some traps would be clutch. Like some Home Alone shit. Goda and Kumasawa, the only thing left for those two who had witnessed the massacre was to cradle their heads without knowing how to interpret what they had seen.
熊沢さん大丈夫？お茶飲む？
ありがとうございますね。申し訳ございませんが、しばらくそっとしていただけますか。
Maria tried to be nice, but it seemed that Kumasawa still hadn't been able to clear away her confusion.
マリア、気を使ってくれてありがとうだぜ。熊沢さんは休ませてやってくれ。
Jessica was also worried about the shock those two must have received after witnessing such a tragedy, but her wildest dreams couldn't have come close to those unbelievable scenes that Kurosawa had witnessed. Nevertheless, with her mother murdered and her father captured, it wasn't as though Jessica could stay calm either. She sealed her anxiety and sadness, using her anger towards Kinzo, and walked irritatedly around the room.
熊沢さん、母さんは本当に。
あんなひどい死に方を私は。
Yeah,
ひょっとするとまだ生きてて、手当てをすれば助かるなんてことは。
Yo, plastic surgery ain't gonna save that half of the head missing.
頭があんなことになって生きていられるわけが。
そりゃそうだぜ。手当てなんて必要ねえよな。
That is true. When Goda had come flying into the guest house, he had overcome with that agitation, told about the massacre in the dining hall without concealing anything, except for the part about witches and magic, which they themselves couldn't believe. In other words, he hadn't even exaggerated the cold-blooded way in which Natsui and the others had died. It was too late now, but Kumasawa regretted the fact that they'd obviously said too much. However, while lightly shaking her head with a small painful laugh, Jessica spoke.
いや、むしろ話してくれたおかげで冷静になれたぜ。頭を砕かれちまったってところを伏せられてたら、屋敷へ向かいじい様にて食わして、 ひょっとすると殺されてたかもしれない。
That's a good point.
一抹の希望が命取りになった可能性だってあるわけさ。その意味では感謝してるよ。
本当に申し訳ございません。言葉をあまりに選ばなかったことは
今はいいよ。母さんはもうどうしようもないけど、カノン君もシャノンもキリエおばさんも南條先生もね、なんとか彼らを助けたいし、彼らに負担をかけないためにも余計なことをするべきではない。電話の前で待機してることが今は一番の協力になるかもしれないし。
They might receive a phone call asking them to create a diversion while the others escape. Or the others might discover their location and call for rescue. Jessica understood that in order to act promptly when the time came, the only thing they could do for the time was wait in this room. Once they had finished inspecting the downstairs area and locking up, George Battler and Goda returned. Each was holding various objects. George had things like drinks, canned food, crackers, and other types of snacks he had found in the lounge and in a storage room, as well as a first aid kit. They were all consumables that would be essential during a siege. Goda had a large folding ladder and carpentry tools. Those were to steel the door from the inside just in case. And if it came down to it, the ladder was for escaping out the window. Battler brought up objects that could be used as edged weapons or poles. In addition to the obvious kitchen knife, there was a disassembled table leg that could be used as a club, and a pole roughly the size of a person, which he apparently made by taking apart the hat stand. Even though the pole had no point, it could surely be used like a spear. There was a good chance that their enemies had guns, so it was dubious whether they would be of any use. But it was still better than not having them, and if having these could give them at least a little peace of mind, then they'd be useful for their calming effect. Then the bed and sofa were piled up against the door, barricading it. They didn't go so far as to seal it up with nails. There was still a chance that Kraus and the others would escape and come up and meet with them. They apparently had set up a barricade at the top of the stairs as well. It had been set up in a way that would create a racket so they would serve as a... Okay. That apparently had been Battler's idea. He watched Home Alone, obviously. For that reason, they turned the TV off. This way, the first floor window would be broken. They would hear. Once the switch had been turned, all that was left was the eerie silence. The sound of violent wind and rain. Were they going to have to spend the whole night being crushed by such suspense? The boat would come tomorrow morning. However, judging by the weather report, most of tomorrow was going to be covered in the typhoon. The boat probably wouldn't come. The typhoon was set to pass by the morning of the day after tomorrow. In other words, the boat would be arriving the morning after next, the morning of October 6th. And right now, it was late at night, October 4th. They would have to spend more than 30 hours on this island, with Kinzo turned cold-blooded murderer and his weird companions prowling about. Even with these shutters closed, there would definitely be a little bit of light seeping out. It might let the enemy know that they were hiding here. Battler suggested that it might be best to turn off the lights. But they had already been overwhelmed by a ghastly feeling from turning the TV off. There wasn't anyone who directly challenged his proposal, but then again, there wasn't another single person to agree with it.
Oh, テレビダメなの？
ああ、悪いが我慢してくれ。敵の侵入の音を聞き逃すわけにはいかない。
つまんない。
Even though she had been told of her mother's death, Maria alone didn't feel an approaching sense of danger. She seemed to be upset that the TV had been turned off. Even though she's in such a bizarre situation, can she not share in her sense of danger? Is it because she's so young? To Battler, even this faintly unsettling feeling from such a young girl made him sense that there was something very eerie about Maria.
とは言ったものの、万策尽きたわね。鉄格子は何とかなりそう？
残念だが、想像以上に堅牢だ。
Yeah, they can't use the wire of the phone.
いつ頃に作られたものか知らんが、耐用年数も文句なし。実に有料な物件だよ。
Kiria chuckled softly. They had no moves they could make, but she had calmed just a little.
さながらここは取られた駒を置く駒置き場ですな。
Well, now I'm just gonna find an answer right
打
here.
つ手はもはやありませんか。
まだよ。諦めるには早いわ。思考の停止は鼓動の停止に同じよ。
だな。チェスの駒置き場に意味はないが、将棋ならば大きな意味を持つこともある。駒置き場の一枚の歩が、相手にプレッシャーを与えることだってあるはずだ。
なるほど。しかし、この鉄格子はどうしようも。
Well, we know freaking Jessica can't fit through the bars because her freaking gazongas are too big.
私たちにはね。でも、ここの場所を特定し、合田さんに連絡することができれば、助けに来てもらうことはできるかも。
なるほど。しかし、合田さんに危険を強いることになり
Yeah,
ま
it's
す。
fine if you put Goda in danger. I don't think
その
anyone's
場
gonna
合
be disappointed.
成人男性が不在になるゲストハウスのお子さんたちも不安です。
リスクを恐れるなら、事態が好転するまで塩漬けにするのも悪くない。もっとも、損切りを恐れれば、紙切れ同然になるかもしれんがね。我々の命がだが。
親の子犬もね。私たちで何とかするからおとなしくしていなさいって偉そうに電話して、その下の根も乾かないうちに助けを求めるなんて、実に格好悪いわね。
この後に及んでは、くだらんプライドなどとっくに紙切れだ。知恵を絞ろうじゃないか。ここはどこなんだ？本当に食堂の真下なのだろうか。それとも、屋敷とは異なる別の場所だろうか。
Kraus, Kyrie, and Nanja began to discuss this further. Ken was squatting by the bars, silently trying to sense anyone's presence, just as he had been ordered. Shinna came close to him and they were both squatting down together.
気配は感じるの？
こちらに意識は向けていないけれど、比較的近くに誰かいる。
それは人間？
ヤギたちだと思う。
Oh,
あいつらの吐息は
they're not super
実に
strong
賑
though.
やかだよ。
Ken's ability to sense the presence of others was several levels above that of a human. He said that their breathing was noisy, but Cress and the rest couldn't even pick up the slightest hint of it. Therefore, if he obediently reported it, they would have merely doubted Cannon's ears.
捕まっちゃったね。
珍しいよ。殺されないで捕まるなんて。
今回はベアトリーチェ様がお越しにならないし。
So they remember. Guys, this is so important. What the Are they the only people that remember?
親方様が書斎を出られるし。
Why can they remember?
何が何だかわかんないね。
Is it because they're furniture?
わかるさ。何が起ころうと変わろうと。すべて結果は何も変わらないのさ。
今回は黄金鏡に行けるかな。
This is the first time someone has mentioned remembering that stuff has happened, not in the... I don't even know what the in-between world is called, where they're watching. I'll just call it fragment world, even though that's not what it is, but...
さあね。
Do other people remember? Is
僕
another
たちは
question.
脱落率が高いから。
I think Kinzo
そういえ
does,
ば、
but
二人で第一の番を生き延びたのって、ずいぶん珍しい
yeah, this
ね。
is freaking insane.
儀式が始まってるのに、こうして二人でお話できるなんて、なんだかすごく珍しい気がする。
そうかもね。でも、それもまた、魔女の余興だろうさ。僕たちがいつもすぐに脱落するから、今度は少し生き延びさせて、からかってやろうくらいにしか思ってないよ。
また、黄金鏡にはたどり着けないのかな。
どうせそうさ。下手な期待を持つと、またつけ込まれる。
そうだね。前回はカノン君がつけ込まれたもんね。
僕はバカだ。
Kenny made a sour look and turned his head. Shannon laughed softly and apologetically leaned towards his shoulder.
でも、お嬢様が無事でよかったね。
第一の番を逃れただけさ。それ以降の番に、より無残な方法で殺されるのを待たされているだけかも。それを言ったら姉さんこそ、ジョージ様が無事でよかったじゃないか。二人で黄金鏡にたどり着けるといいね。
ありがとう。同じことをカノン君とお嬢様にも。
I mean, I think everyone's rooting for Shannon and George more than Cannon and Jessica, let's be real.
僕は期待はしてないよ。姉さんの言う通りだ。あの魔女は、ご褒美をぶら下げて、相手が右往左往するのを見て、どうせ誰も黄金鏡に行けやしない。僕がお嬢様と、あいつはそれこそ面白がって、絶対に僕たちをたどり着かせたりはしないさ。
Well, 4 people make it every time, technically, right?
ベアトリーチェ様は、より面白くなるように、生贄の順番を
無作為に選んでるなんて、大嘘だ。
And the fact that Beatrice, it seems like she's not very involved this time.
ペテンシ魔女め。どうせ、
Seems like Kinzo is kind of
黄
taking
金鏡
control.
にたどり着けば、あらゆる願いが叶うなんてのも、嘘っぱ。
そんなことはないよ。黄金鏡は、素晴らしいところだよ。
行ったことあるの？
ちょっぴりだけね。それすらも、ベアトリーチェ様の戯れだったのだろうけど。
どんなとこなの？そこ。
うん。素晴らしいところだよ。うまく説明できない。安らかな、夢の中みたいな世界。
バラが咲き乱れてて、美しい蝶が舞ってるような、極楽みたいな。
そういう具体的なイメージのところじゃないの。本当に、夢の中みたいなところなの。そこにいるときは、とても穏やかで、安ら、いつまでも眠ってることを
This
許さ
OST
れ
is
てる。
so freaking
まるで
good.
カーテンの隙間から日が差してきて、そろそろ起きないと、と思うんだけど、今日は休日だから起きなくてもいいんだって気づいて、
That's one of the
もう
greatest
一回
feelings in
お
the
布団
world.
の中に潜り込むときみたいな、そんな気持ちになる。
僕なら損したと思うな。休日なのに勘違いして起き出すなんて、姉さんくらいだ。それで？
うん。そこにいたときはね、満たされてて、とても穏やかだった。でも、元の世界に戻ってくると、つい直前までそこにいたはずなのに、うまくついさっきまで見ていた夢が思い出せないのによく似てる。でも、とっても穏やかで、静かな世界だったことだけは覚えてるの。
Don't you hate those dreams that they're like amazing and then you like are trying not to wake up from them but you feel yourself waking up?
それだけ？なんだ。あいつが偉そうに言う黄金鏡なんて、何でも願いが叶う場所だと思ってたのに。
その通りだよ。何でも願いが叶う場所。少し違うかもしれない。
Well, like, what is golden for you is not golden for other
何も
people,
願わ
right?
なくてもいい場所が例えばカノン君が 寒くて上着が欲しいと願った時、上着をもらえればとても幸せなことだけど、そもそも暖かい部屋にいられたなら上着が欲しいなんて願う必要さえもないでしょ。黄金鏡はそういうところなの。
That's a very interesting way to describe it, and I like completely
願う必要さえ
understand.
なくなる。全てから解放された
Yeah,
何も
I
かも
can
が
see
穏
the
やかな
appeal
世
of
界
all
なの。
that.
与えられて幸せという概念さえも超越した全てから解放された世界
Although
とでも言えばいいのかな。
personally, I feel like one of the best feelings in the world is where it's like kind of cold and you just have like a light blanket, like and cuddle up with it. I feel like that's better than like the perfect temperature, but that's just me.
なんだか宗教っぽい世界だな。
そしてそこでは全てが平等なの。意志ある存在は全てが平等。人間も家具も魔女もない。そこでの私は誰とも対等で公平。もう家具だからと何も自分を恥じる必要がない。全ての人間とも、そして魔女とさえ対等な、うまく思い出せないけど、そこでは私、ベアトリーチェ様とさえ対等な関係で、良い友達でいられた気がする。
あの魔女がいるなら、ろくな理想郷じゃないよ。で、その幸せな黄金鏡に、姉さんおかしな話だね。黄金鏡は全てが満ち足りた理想郷なわけでしょ。
She wants to be
ジョージ
pleased
様
with
がいなくて
George.
も、十分に満たされてそうだけど。
That's a fair
黄
point.
金鏡はね、とても穏やかで安らかで、全てが対等で公平だけれど、幸せだけ、実は抜けてるの。
幸せな世界じゃないの？
It's absent of sadness and
も
happiness,
ちろん
right?
安らかで穏やかで公平というだけですごい幸せな世界だよ。でもそれは例えるなら全ての悩みというマイナスから解放されたゼロの世界なの。人の世はマイナスで満ちてるから、もちろんゼロというのはものすごい幸福なわけだけど贅沢だよね。それはこういう感じ。穏やかな休日の朝のまどろみの時、最愛の人も隣にいてくれて手を握っててくれたなら、もっとごめん、姉さんは例えが下手くそだね。バカだから。
つまり、姉さんにとっての最高の幸せとは、ジョージ様と一緒に。
そしてきっとカノン君にとってはお嬢様と一緒。
公平な世界で二人は悩みから解放されなんだかおかしな宗教を吹き
It's
込まれ
like
てるみたい
heaven
だ。
or nirvana.
僕はもっとこう魔法の薬を与えられると人間に生まれ変われるとか、そういう感じの世界を想像してたよ。
行けばわかるよ。ベアトリーチェ様が本当に気まぐれな方なら、いつかきっとカノン君、そうすれば姉さんの例えがよくわかるようになるから。
ま、過剰な期
I
待は
actually
しないこと
really
にしと
like
く
the
よ。
way that she described all that. That is such an interesting way to look at all those things.
今回の僕たちはこれでゲームオーバーみたいだし、別の機会に期待するさ。
そうだね。おかしな期待を持つとベアトリーチェ様にまたつけ込まれる。何も考えずただ運命に身を任せるのが私たちには。
僕たちはただチェスの駒であればいいんだ。何を考えても考えなくても、どうせ魔女のチェス盤からは逃れられない。後のお役目はどういびり殺されるか。そんな僕らに黄金鏡の夢なんて。
そうだね。 ごめん。
Cannon shrugged his shoulders, then told Shannon to leave him alone because this was in the way of his duty, distancing himself from her. Realizing her thoughtlessness in bringing up such an inappropriate topic instead hurting Cannon, Shannon bit her lower lip and stared at the ground. Shannon wouldn't bother him anymore. She went off and crouched down in a corner by herself. At that moment, Cannon perked up. It was like the ears of a cat when it reacts to a strange sound.
どうしたの？
旦那様、誰か来ます。
Ooh, shit.
何？
They ended their conversation and strained their ears. For a while, they couldn't hear anything. But eventually, they were able to hear shuffling sounds of a large group of people walking.
おいでなすったわね。
年貢の納め時か、さもなくも最初で最後のチャンスか。
It's probably Cannon and Shannon, right? Those are the only two that are close.
私が金蔵さんと話しましょう。
Okay.
なんとかここの場所を聞き出してみます。
期待してるわ。
Yeah, good freaking luck. During the last phone call, Kyrie had asked what time was over at the guest house. By doing that, Kyrie learned that it was the same as her watch, so she had learned that their watches hadn't been set back. It wasn't just the clocks on the walls in the guest house. Several people's watches, including George's and Goda's, had matched. If that was the case, then it had only been a few minutes between the time of the massacre in the dining hall and the time they had been transported into the dungeon. Not enough time had passed for them to be knocked out and carried away. Then, were those really pitfalls, meaning that this was the area directly under the dining hall? All they could do is pray that Nanjo could find out where this was.
来ます。多分、人数は4人。親方様、並びに食堂に姿を現したうちの3人かと。
もう十分だ。君も後ろに下がりたまえ。あとは私たちで応対する。
シャノンちゃん、申し訳ないけど、電話のところに座ってもらえ。スカートで電話を隠して。
あ、はい。
The shuffling came to a close, and there was a sound of a large door being opened in the hallway. The light they were apparently carrying illuminated the halls, stroking the walls with sharp, razor-like shadows. And then the light from the lantern they held illuminated the prisoners through the bars. The bars' sharp shadows divided them up lengthwise, and there were 4 silhouettes. It was Kinzo, Rono, Virgilia, and Gop.
後ろ宮家当主、
All
ロ
right.
ールドスミス教のおなりでございます。
Okay, I'm saving here. Another great episode. Like for me, like I'm having tons of fun playing this. Let me page 3. Yeah, I mean the last one was like so intense. This one was very good as well. The biggest thing is that Shannon and Cannon remember going through the loops, which is a freaking game changer because it seems like no one else really remembers other than probably Kinzo, but he's the person who put this in motion. So maybe he doesn't necessarily remember, but he knows that they're happening, I believe. Maybe he remembers, but yeah, great episode. Let me know what you guys thought about this in the comments below.